Get ready to explore 6 chilling true stories of bear encounters across North America and Russia. Hunters, photographers, and adventurers meet nature's most dangerous predators in moments of sheer survival. This video reveals what happens when humans cross paths with massive, unpredictable bears, from forest trails to remote camps. June 15, 2025, on a humid morning deep in Sakhalin's dense forest, 3 vloggers set out to capture the rarest wildlife footage for their growing online audience. Anna, Dmitry, and Ivan were no strangers to the wild. Anna was a passionate nature documentarian with a sharp eye for detail. Dmitry was a skilled cameraman and survival enthusiast, and Ivan was an experienced outdoorsman who often scouted the trails and terrain for the group. Each brought their energy and expertise, confident in navigating the unforgiving Russian wilderness. They had chosen a particularly remote patch of forest, far from roads or ranger stations, where the canopy hung thick and the air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. Their live stream had been running for nearly an hour as they moved cautiously through the underbrush, whispering excitedly about tracking elusive animals. The viewers watching the feed could see the flickers of sunlight through the leaves, the subtle rustle of branches, and the occasional glimpse of a squirrel or bird. But the real prize was the Russian grizzly, an enormous beast rumored to roam this part of the island, yet rarely seen. As they pressed further, the chatter between the 3 grew louder with nervous excitement. They laughed, joked, and shared snacks, unaware that their voices and the smell of food on their gear were slowly drawing the attention of a massive predator nearby. The forest, usually alive with quiet sounds, had fallen strangely still, a tense hush hanging in the air. Without warning, a thunderous crash exploded from the thick brush just ahead. The 3 froze, eyes widening in terror. Then, with terrifying speed, a giant Russian grizzly burst into the clearing. Its shaggy fur was matted with dirt, and its eyes burned with raw, wild fury. The beast was easily twice the size of any grizzly Anna and the others had seen in documentaries. The bear charged without hesitation, muscles rippling under its massive frame as it slammed into Anna first. She had barely time to react before the animal caught her like a rag doll, hurling her body into a fallen log with a sickening crack. The impact stunned her, but the bear was relentless, its massive jaws closing over her arm and tearing through muscle and bone. Anna's screams cut through the air, piercing the forest's eerie silence. Dmitry, positioned just a few feet away with his camera rolling, dropped his equipment and grabbed a heavy branch from the ground. Adrenaline flooding his veins, he swung wildly, desperate to fend off the attack. But the bear swatted the branch aside with a single swipe, then lunged at Dmitry. The man stumbled, but tried to hold his ground, only to be dragged down into the dirt as the beast clamped down on his leg. His agonized cries echoed on the live stream, chilling the hearts of thousands of viewers watching helplessly. Ivan, frozen in shock at first, finally spun to run. He sprinted toward a stand of trees, adrenaline fueling his desperate flight. But the uneven ground betrayed him. Roots tangled his feet, and he tripped, crashing face first into the dirt. Before he could scramble, the bear was upon him, pinning him against a thick tree trunk. Its jaws bit repeatedly into his torso, crushing ribs and tearing flesh. Ivan's silent struggle was visible as the camera fell, spinning wildly on the ground, showing only the blurred horror of the attack. The live stream feed crackled with static and suddenly died, leaving thousands of followers frozen in shock and disbelief. Their screens were filled with frantic messages and unanswered questions. 2 hours later, a team of forest rangers arrived at the scene, called out by alarmed viewers who had contacted authorities. The forest was eerily silent, except for the distant hum of insects and the crunch of ranger boots on fallen leaves. They found the devastated clearing stained dark with blood and scattered with broken branches. The bodies of Anna, Dmitry, and Ivan lay mangled and lifeless, the gruesome work of the massive grizzly clear on their torn clothing and crushed bones. The bear was found a short distance away, lethargic but still dangerous. The rangers had little choice. They suspected the animal had become conditioned to humans, likely fed illegally by careless visitors over time, which explained its aggressive behavior. The bear was euthanized to prevent further attacks, but the damage was done. Back on the internet, thousands mourned the trio who had chased their dream deep into the forest, only to be violently cut down. The vloggers' families quickly took down the live stream, but those who had watched it live would never forget the horrors of that day. The stark reality of the wild's danger had shattered any illusions of safety or control. The forest reclaimed its silence once more, the echoes of screams fading into the dense trees as nature's raw power reminded all who dared venture there of its merciless unpredictability. Anna, Dmitri, and Ivan had entered the woods seeking wonder and discovery. Still, in the end, the primal force of the grizzly told the true story, a brutal, merciless reminder that some corners of the world still belong solely to the wild. Lena had spent years studying bears in Alaska. Her passion focused on the elusive Kodiak family that roamed the tundra ridge near Old Harbor on Kodiak Island. She was a seasoned wildlife photographer, patient and methodical, knowing when to stay still and when to move. Her slender frame was wrapped in layers of cold-weather gear, and her camera, equipped with a long telephoto lens, was her constant companion. Today, the air was crisp and clean, and the golden light of early morning stretched across the wide tundra, painting the low hills in soft hues of orange and brown. She had spotted the bear family hours earlier, a mother and two cubs moving slowly through the brush near the ridge's edge. Staying downwind and at a safe distance, Lena had carefully positioned herself behind a rocky outcrop, focusing intently through the lens. Every click of her shutter was deliberate, capturing intimate moments as the cubs played and the mother foraged. The tundra was vast and wild, but in that vastness lay danger, subtle and silent. Unknown to Lena, a lone male Kodiak had been tracking the same area from the opposite slope. Large and territorial, the male moved downwind of her position, silent as the wind rustled the sparse grass. His muscles tensed beneath thick, dark fur, and his eyes scanned the terrain with cautious aggression. Bears were solitary creatures, especially the males, and any perceived intrusion near their territory could trigger a violent response. Lena, lost in her photography, remained unaware. The soft wind muted the crunch of her boot on loose gravel, and the scent she carried mixed with the earth and vegetation, unnoticed until it was too late. Suddenly, a movement caught the corner of her eye. She turned slowly, lowering her lens, and froze as the massive form of the lone male bear burst from behind a hill crest, charging straight toward her. There was no time to react, no moment to raise a weapon or retreat. Her grip slipped from the camera as it tumbled, its lens shattering against a rock. Lena stumbled backward, tripping over loose stones, but the bear was upon her instantly. The first impact slammed her to the side, teeth sinking into her left thigh with brutal force. She felt the crushing pain of muscle and bone torn apart as the bear flung her several feet across the tundra like a rag doll. The wind left her lungs as she hit the ground hard. The taste of blood filled her mouth, thick and coppery. Instinct took over, and she curled into a ball, face down, arms trying desperately to shield her head. But the bear was relentless. It reared back and then raked its massive claws down her back, sharp talons shredding through fabric and flesh. Lena's breath hitched in ragged gasps as waves of pain crashed over her, her vision blurring around the edges. Above, the distant thrum of a small plane cut through the quiet wilderness. A wildlife pilot, routinely surveying the area, spotted the chaos unfolding on the ridge below. From his cockpit, he could see the bear tearing into a motionless figure, the blood dark against the pale tundra grass. Without hesitation, he grabbed a flare from the side of the plane and fired it straight down, the bright streak of light arcing through the air and exploding in a brilliant burst of fire. The bear recoiled, startled by the sudden noise and light, retreating with a snarl into the shadows of the nearby trees. The pilot circled lower, firing a second flare as a warning, ensuring the beast did not return. On the ground, Lena lay bleeding, her body trembling from shock and pain. The pristine tundra around her was now torn and stained with dark crimson. Her backpack, ripped open and soaked in blood, was found nearly 100 meters from where the attack had occurred. It had likely been torn from her during the initial collision. Rangers arrived within the hour, alerted by the pilot's emergency call. They found Lena barely conscious, pale and weak, but alive. Immediate first aid was administered on site, tourniquets applied, wounds cleaned, and morphine given to ease the unbearable pain. The medics prepared her for an airlift to the nearest hospital. As the helicopter rose from the tundra, Lena lay strapped to the stretcher, the sterile hum of the aircraft mixing with the pounding of her heartbeat. Her thoughts drifted in and out of consciousness, flashes of the attack replaying with horrifying clarity. The roar of the bear, the crushing bite, the unbearable agony of claws tearing flesh. The attack was a stark reminder of the fragile balance between humans and wild predators. Kodiak bears were majestic, powerful creatures, but beneath their grandeur lay a deadly force, shaped by millions of years of survival instincts. This male bear, likely defending his territory, had viewed Lena not as a photographer, but as an intruder. Back on the ridge, investigators found clear signs of the struggle. Deep claw marks gouged into the earth, blood smeared across rocks, and pieces of torn fabric scattered among broken branches. The bear's tracks were fresh, large and deep in the soft tundra soil, disappearing into the dense forest beyond. Lena's survival was miraculous. Despite severe injuries, deep lacerations, muscle damage, and a crushed thigh, her knowledge of wilderness first aid and sheer determination had helped her hold on. The medical team warned that the road to recovery would be long and arduous, filled with surgeries, therapy, and pain. Yet even through the haze of trauma and medication, Lena's thoughts returned to the ridge, to the wild expanse she had loved and feared. The photographs she never took, the camera left behind, and the terrible price she had paid for her passion. The story spread among local communities and wildlife circles in the following weeks. Experts debated the cause of the attack, some pointing to the bear's natural territorial behavior, others suggesting that human presence and habitat encroachment were fueling conflicts. The pilot who fired the flare was hailed as a hero, his quick thinking preventing what could have been a fatal encounter. For Lena, the attack was a brutal lesson in respect and humility. The wild was not a stage for human adventure, but a realm governed by raw and unforgiving laws. Her love for nature remained unbroken, but the line between observer and prey had been forever blurred on that fateful day along the tundra ridge. Tom and Alex had meticulously planned their trip for months, eager to paddle a remote Alaskan river deep within the wilderness. Both men were experienced outdoors people, sharing a bond forged by countless adventures in harsh environments. Tom, in his early 40s, was a skilled paddler with years of experience navigating wild waters and reading the subtle signs nature offered. His friend Alex, slightly younger, was a steady, calm presence and an expert in wilderness survival. Together, they had faced many challenges, but nothing quite like what awaited them on that cold, clear morning. The air was crisp and pure, filled with the scent of pine and fresh water. The river carved a twisting path through dense forest and rocky banks, its surface shimmering beneath the bright Alaskan sun. The current was strong but manageable, tugging insistently at the wooden canoes as the men paddled in close formation. Tom led the way, his paddles slicing through the water with practiced precision, eyes scanning the riverbank for wildlife. Alex followed, alert and quiet, every muscle tuned to the rhythms of the wild. Hours passed with peaceful focus. They had spotted signs of bears before, fresh tracks and broken branches, but no direct encounters. The remote stretch of river they navigated was pristine and untouched, a sanctuary for the animals that thrived in these wild lands. Tom's mind was partly on the journey and the photographs he planned to take, dreaming of capturing the perfect shot of a Kodiak bear or an eagle in flight. Suddenly, a movement on the opposite shore shattered the calm. Out of the dense forest line emerged a colossal grizzly bear, its dark brown fur glistening wet with river spray, muscles rippling beneath a thick coat. The massive animal stood on all fours, a mountain of raw power, its eyes fixed on Tom's canoe as if they were about to collide. Tom barely had time to register the threat before the bear charged. It crashed through the underbrush with terrifying speed and plunged toward the water's edge. The roar of its approach echoed through the valley, a thunderous warning that shattered the morning's stillness. The bear struck Tom's canoe with overwhelming force, its huge paws slashing repeatedly across the wood. Splinters flew as the vessel creaked and groaned under the savage assault. The impact tipped the canoe sharply, and Tom lost his grip on the paddle. The cold river surged around him as he was thrown into the icy water with a brutal splash. The shock of the freezing current stole his breath, and the swirling rapids yanked at him, pulling him downstream in a relentless grip. Panic surged through his body, lungs burning as he fought to keep his head above the surface. But the river was swift, pulling him under rocks and over submerged branches. Then, without warning, massive paws clamped around him, dragging him beneath the water. Tom was briefly pinned underwater, darkness swallowing him as he thrashed unthinkingly against the bear's grip. The crushing pressure and cold sapped his strength, but sheer willpower drove him to break free, bursting through the surface, gasping for air. The attack intensified. The bear latched onto Tom's leg with brutal force, claws ripping through the neoprene waders, slicing deep into muscle and flesh. Sharp pain exploded through his leg as blood mixed with the churning river water. Tom struggled to kick and push away, but the bear's grip was like iron. Witnessing the harrowing attack from his canoe a short distance away, Alex reacted with urgency born from fear and survival instinct. Hands trembling, he fumbled through his dry bag and pulled out an emergency flare. He struck the igniter with shaking fingers, sending a fiery red flare skyward. The sudden blaze and piercing noise startled the bear, which released Tom's leg with a growl and staggered back. Alex waved the flare wildly, desperately shouting as the bear hesitated, eyes locked on the burning light. The animal snarled, anger flashing across its face, but the flare's brilliance finally drove it back into the forest. Its heavy steps crushed the underbrush as it disappeared, leaving a stunned silence broken only by the rushing river. Tom, shaking with cold and pain, hauled himself onto the rocky riverbank. His legs trembled beneath him, muscles torn and bleeding heavily. He collapsed, breath ragged, the taste of iron heavy in his mouth. Blood pooled around him, soaking into the stones and soil, a grim testament to the violence he had just endured. Alex knelt beside his friend, urgency pushing him to act despite his shock. He applied pressure to the wounds, tearing strips from his shirt to stem the bleeding while calling for help on their satellite phone. Their remote location meant the wait for medical assistance would be long, but Alex remained steadfast, refusing to let panic take hold. The trip back to civilization was a tense ordeal. Tom was weak and disoriented, pain flaring with every movement. The helicopter ride was a blur of cold wind, distant voices, and medical staff working quickly to stabilize him. His injuries were severe, deep gashes threatening to sever tendons and muscles, bruises from his brutal plunge into the river, and the slow onset of hypothermia from prolonged exposure to icy water. Alex, though unharmed physically, was shaken to his core. The trauma of witnessing his friend's near-fatal attack haunted him, a dark cloud over their shared memories of the trip. He fought to remain calm, drawing on his training and the bond forged by years of friendship to support Tom through every agonizing moment. When the Rangers arrived at the river hours later, they found the overturned canoe, its once sturdy frame scarred by huge claw gouges. The deep scratches ran like savage lines across the wood, evidence of the bear's brutal assault. Blood trailed from the riverbank into the thick brush beyond, marking the path the animal had taken as it vanished into the wilderness. The attack was a brutal reminder of the unforgiving laws of nature. Tom and Alex, despite their experience and respect for the wild, had been caught off guard by the raw power of the Kodiak grizzly. The bear, a symbol of Alaska's wild heart, had defended its territory with merciless instinct, a force beyond human control. Tom's road to recovery was long and painful, filled with surgeries and therapy to regain strength and mobility in his damaged leg. Yet through the haze of pain and trauma, his determination never wavered. The wilderness had tested him, nearly claimed him, but it had not broken his spirit. The river and the bear would remain etched in his memory, an unyielding testament to the wild's beauty and danger, the delicate balance between respect and survival. As he healed, Tom knew that one day he would return to those waters, not as a victim, but as a witness to nature's raw, untamed power. The wedding reception unfolded perfectly in the forest clearing, a picturesque scene bathed in the warm glow of late afternoon light filtering through towering Vermont pines. Mia, a spirited woman in her late 20s who had grown up near these woods, felt the joy of the day pulse through her veins. She had always loved the wilderness, but today her focus was on the people, the laughter, the celebration of love, the mingling of friends and family. The white tables were dressed with crisp linens, piled high with food. Glasses sparkled in the sunlight, and the scent of roasted meats, fresh fruit, and wine filled the air. The gentle hum of conversation, the soft rustle of leaves stirred by a cool breeze, and the distant chirping of birds created a calm symphony in this remote clearing. The guests relaxed, some dancing, others chatting quietly beneath the twinkling lights between the trees. It was a perfect summer evening, warm and just a bit humid, the kind of night that seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. Then, everything changed. Suddenly, a shadow burst from the tree line with terrifying speed. A massive black bear crashed through the thick underbrush, its dark fur gleaming as it thundered forward. It was drawn by the strong scent of food and alcohol that hung thick in the air. Without hesitation, the bear charged the buffet tables, smashing through coolers and knocking plates and cups flying in all directions. The bear's huge paws slammed down on the tables with bone-crushing force, spilling an avalanche of food and drink onto the ground. The noise was deafening. The crash of glass, the clatter of metal, the roar of the bear itself as it swept its claws across the spread. Guests froze momentarily, stunned by the sudden chaos, before screams erupted and panic swept through the crowd. People scattered, stumbling over one another in frantic attempts to escape the rampaging beast. Chairs were overturned, glasses shattered, and the joyful energy of the evening turned to fear and confusion. Amid the chaos, Mia spotted a small child, a little girl no older than 4, standing terrified and unable to move. Mia's instincts kicked in immediately. She moved quickly to place herself between the child and the bear, crouching low to shield the girl with her body. Her heart hammered violently as she faced the enormous animal, its wild eyes locked onto her with a dangerous gleam. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Then the bear lunged. Powerful claws slashed through the air, tearing through Mia's sleeve and ripping deep, burning scratches across her forearm. The pain was sudden and fierce, hot blood soaking her skin. She staggered back but refused to yield, shielding the child as best she could, her body tense and trembling from adrenaline and shock. Nearby, a guest reacted quickly. Grabbing a folding chair tossed aside, he swung it with desperate force at the bear's head. The chair struck with a solid thud, startling the animal. The bear snarled in frustration, shaking its head as it bared sharp teeth, but the unexpected blow forced it to retreat. With a final roar, the bear turned and disappeared into the trees, retreating into the shadowed forest. The clearing fell eerily silent, broken only by heavy breathing and the faint rustle of leaves. Emergency crews arrived swiftly, their presence a calming balm on the frayed nerves of the guests. Paramedics tended to Mia's wounds, cleaning the deep punctures and long scratches left by the bear's claws. Bruises bloomed across her arm, swelling beneath the torn fabric of her dress. Despite the injuries, Mia's expression was resolute, a fierce survivor who had stood her ground when it mattered most. Investigators who arrived afterward uncovered why the bear had been so boldly drawn to the wedding site. They found multiple unsecured garbage bins and coolers scattered around the area, many containing leftover food and the lingering scent of alcohol. These attractants had created a dangerous magnet for wildlife, particularly the local black bears that roamed the Vermont forests. The authorities took swift action, closing off the forest edge near the clearing for several weeks. This precaution was necessary to ensure public safety and to discourage the bears from venturing too close to human activity. Wildlife officers removed food sources and set up monitoring to track the bears' movements, hoping to prevent future incidents. The wedding itself was cut short. The joyous celebration abruptly ended by the terrifying intrusion. Guests gathered afterward in small clusters, their voices low as they processed the event. What was meant to be a night of happiness had become a raw reminder of the wild's unpredictable presence. For Mia, the experience left more than just physical scars. The shock and adrenaline lingered, mingling with the pain in her arm. Yet beneath the trauma was a deep current of gratitude. She had protected the child, and no one else had been hurt. Her courage became a beacon for those who witnessed the chaos, a testament to the resilience and strength that can surface in moments of crisis. The bear's bold charge into the clearing underscored the delicate balance between human celebration and wilderness existence. The forest was home to creatures governed by instinct, drawn sometimes dangerously close by careless human choices. It was a lesson etched into the memories of everyone there, a reminder that respect for nature's power is essential, no matter the occasion. Weeks later, as the forest edge reopened and life slowly returned to normal, the story of the wedding bear spread through the community. It was retold with disbelief and admiration, how a joyous gathering had been shattered by raw, primal force, and how one woman's quick courage had made all the difference. Mia's recovery was slow but steady. The puncture wounds required careful treatment to prevent infection, and the bruising left her arm swollen and painful for weeks. Yet she refused to be defined by the attack. Instead, she saw it as part of a larger story about the wild's unpredictable beauty and danger, a story she would carry with her forever. Once a place of laughter and dance, the forest clearing now held a quiet respect, a memory of the day when the wild pushed back against human intrusion. And though the wedding was cut short, the strength and survival that emerged amid the chaos became the true legacy of that summer evening in Vermont. Mark had always been a solitary man who preferred nature's quiet rhythms to the noisy clamor of civilization. At 42, he was a seasoned fisheries biologist with years of experience tracking salmon runs across Alaska. This morning, he was working alone at a remote salmon weir nestled deep in the southwestern reaches of Kodiak Island, where few ventured. The weir was a critical part of ongoing research, a structure designed to channel spawning salmon into counting areas where Mark tagged fish and recorded vital data. The sun had just begun to edge above the horizon, spilling pale light across the rugged landscape. A cold breeze stirred the brambles and fir trees that bordered the riverbank. Mark's breath steamed in the crisp morning air as he finished logging his last radio update, his voice steady, routine, before the line went silent. Hours passed. When his colleague arrived at the site well after midday, the atmosphere felt wrong, heavy with an eerie stillness that raised hairs on the back of her neck. The gravel path leading to the weir was disturbed, with scattered equipment in disarray. Mark's tags, notebooks, and measuring tools were strewn as if dropped in a sudden rush. Dark, smeared tracks stained the muddy bank, blood mixing with crushed foliage and churned earth. The faint but unmistakable scent of iron hung thick in the air. Moving cautiously downstream, she spotted the terrible sight. Mark's lifeless body partially submerged in the cold water, face down and still. His clothing was torn, soaked in blood, his skin marked by deep, jagged wounds. It was immediately clear this was no accident. Fear gripped her as she called for emergency responders and wildlife officials. The investigation that followed pieced together the deadly encounter. Mark had unknowingly stumbled upon a massive Kodiak bear guarding a nearby salmon cache. Kodiak bears fiercely protected their food, especially during the salmon spawn when the rivers teemed with fish. The bear's instincts were primal and unforgiving. Unlike many attacks where animals give warning, growls, swipes, bluff charges, this attack was sudden and merciless. The bear charged fast, bursting from the underbrush without hesitation. Deep claw marks across Mark's back told a brutal story. He had turned to flee, but was caught within just a few steps. His last moments must have been terrifying, struggling to escape the crushing power of a predator built for raw strength and speed. Mark's bear spray, clipped securely to his belt, was found untouched and unused. Whether he was caught off guard so quickly that he never had time to react, or whether fear and shock froze his movements, remained a chilling mystery. The bear's force was overwhelming, the attack swift and lethal. Rangers deployed drones to scour the dense forests near the weir, soon locating the bear responsible. Its behavior had been noted before. This was not the first aggressive encounter linked to this particular animal. Reports of unprovoked charges and close calls with fishermen and researchers had raised concerns. After consultation, authorities euthanized the bear, a decision made to protect the local community and prevent further tragedy. The salmon weir was shut down indefinitely. What had been a site of scientific inquiry and conservation had become a place marked by loss and fear. Mark's death sent shockwaves through the small scientific community that worked tirelessly on Kodiak Island. He was remembered as a dedicated, cautious, knowledgeable professional who respected the wild and understood the risks of working in such remote environments. His passing was a grim reminder of the unpredictable dangers that lurk in the wilderness, even for those who think themselves prepared. The scene at the weir remained a somber testament to nature's raw power. Investigators carefully documented the blood-stained tracks, the deep gouges in nearby trees, and the chaotic evidence left behind in the struggle. Every detail told a story of sudden violence, a clash between man and beast, where the odds were cruelly weighted in favor of primal strength. Friends and colleagues grappled with the loss, mourning a life dedicated to preserving fragile ecosystems. They held on to memories of Mark's quiet confidence, careful, methodical work, and passion for understanding the salmon runs vital to the island's environment. This fatal encounter became a cautionary tale, emphasizing the need for heightened vigilance and respect when working in bear country. Experts urged workers to travel in pairs or groups, carry protective equipment in easy reach, and always remain alert to signs of wildlife nearby. In the days following the attack, rangers increased patrols around the island's rivers and streams, installed warning signs, and educated the public about bear safety. They stressed that even the most experienced and prepared individuals were vulnerable if a bear felt threatened or cornered. For those who knew Mark, the grief was deep and personal. His absence left a void in a community that valued his expertise and quiet strength. The knowledge that his death was caused by one of Kodiak's most formidable predators, a creature revered and feared in equal measure, underscored the fragile boundary between humans and the wilderness they sought to study. Though the bear responsible was no longer a threat, the weir remained closed, a silent monument to a deadly moment when the wild turned unforgiving. Mark's story was not just a tragedy, but also a stark reminder that nature's raw forces demand humility. No matter how skilled or prepared, humans are visitors in a world governed by instincts far older and more powerful than any safety protocol or scientific knowledge. Chris had hunted the dense Oregon woods for years, mastering the art of moving quietly through the thick underbrush under the cover of night. At 37, he was confident in his skills and familiar with the risks, especially when spotlight hunting alone in territory known for black bears. The night air was cool and damp, thick with the smell of pine and moss, the forest alive with faint rustles and distant calls. He kept his flashlight steady, the beam cutting through the darkness, searching for signs of movement. Focused on the shadows, Chris scanned for the glint of animal eyes, his muscles coiled for sudden action. The forest floor was uneven, littered with fallen branches, rocks, and dense brush, and each step required care. His breathing and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot broke the quiet. He had trained for moments like this, knowing that one wrong move could provoke the animals that shared the woods. Suddenly, without any warning, a huge black bear exploded from the darkness less than 20 feet away. Its eyes burned with raw aggression as it charged forward with terrifying speed. Chris barely had time to react before the massive beast collided with him, the impact throwing him off balance and stumbling backward onto the forest floor. The bear's powerful body pinned him down instantly, and the world narrowed to the savage struggle for survival. Adrenaline surged through Chris's veins as he reached for his rifle and fired 2 rapid shots. The deafening blasts echoed through the trees, but the bear barely flinched. One bullet grazed its shoulder, the other tore into its side. The animal snarled in pain but did not retreat. Instead, it swiped its massive paw with claws like razors, raking across Chris's ribs and tearing through his jacket and flesh. A searing pain exploded along his side, sharp and relentless. Chris gasped for breath, struggling under the bear's weight as it snapped its jaws on his neck. Teeth sank deep, crushing muscle and skin, blood spurting onto the forest floor. The taste of iron filled his mouth as he fought to stay conscious. The bear dragged him violently, the world spinning around him in a blur of pain and fear. Desperation sharpened his senses. With his free hand, he grasped the hunting knife strapped to his belt, a blade honed for close encounters and survival. Summoning every ounce of strength, he thrust the knife upward, aiming for the bear's eye. The blade sank in with a sickening crunch. The bear recoiled, howling in agony, momentarily stunned. Using the opening, Chris scrambled toward a nearby tree, every movement a battle against pain and exhaustion. His hands clawed at the rough bark as he climbed, the bear roaring and slashing at the trunk below him. The sound of its claws scraping wood echoed in the stillness. Chris clung to the tree for nearly 10 minutes, heart pounding and vision blurred as the bear paced beneath him, snarling and snapping in frustration. Blood dripped from his wounds, staining the bark and soaking his clothes. The cold night air bit into his exposed skin, and every breath reminded him of his injuries. The bear's anger filled the forest, but finally it retreated into the shadows, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. Chris remained frozen for several long moments, chest heaving, body trembling. His side and neck throbbed with deep, burning pain, but the threat had passed, for now. Slowly, painfully, he began his descent from the tree. Every movement sent shockwaves through his battered body, muscles screaming in protest. He landed awkwardly on the forest floor, weak and disoriented, surrounded by silence that felt both dangerous and surreal. Knowing he needed help, Chris crawled through the thick underbrush. Each inch was agonizing, the forest floor rough and uneven beneath him. He pressed one hand against his neck wound, applying steady pressure to stem the bleeding. The ground was cold and unforgiving, and the night stretched endlessly around him. Hours passed as he dragged himself forward, every movement a fight against dizziness and fatigue. His vision blurred, shadows closing in, but he refused to give in. He had survived the bear's attack. Now he had to endure the journey back to safety. Finally, after an impossible crawl, Chris reached the dirt road where he had left his truck. His strength almost gone, he hauled himself into the driver's seat, shivering and soaked with blood. With one hand gripping the steering wheel, the other pressed firmly to his neck, he started the engine. The truck's headlights pierced the darkness as he began the slow, agonizing drive toward the nearest hospital. The ride was perilous, every bump and turn jarring his wounded body. Blood loss and shock threatened to pull him under, but Chris gritted his teeth and focused on survival. The miles ticked by painfully, each one a small victory against the odds. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly. His wounds were grave. Deep claw marks across his ribs and severe puncture wounds on his neck where the bear's teeth had torn through flesh and muscle. He had lost a dangerous amount of blood and faced a serious risk of infection. Yet despite the severity, Chris held on. His recovery would be long and painful, but the doctors called his survival nothing short of miraculous. Meanwhile, wildlife rangers searched the area where the attack had occurred. They tracked massive black bear footprints leading away from the scene, following the path the animal had taken before disappearing into the dense forest. No trace of the bear was found, and it seemed to vanish without a trace. The investigation concluded the attack was defensive. The bear had been surprised and provoked in its territory, reacting with deadly force to what it perceived as a threat. Incidents like this were rare, but brutal reminders of the unpredictable power of nature when humans entered wild spaces. Chris's story spread quickly through hunting and outdoor communities, a grim warning about the dangers of hunting alone at night in bear country. His survival was a testament to his resilience and preparedness, and a stark lesson in respect for the wild. The forest that had been his refuge and passion now held darker memories, a place where life and death had collided in a sudden, violent struggle. Despite everything, Chris never lost his respect for the wilderness. His experience was a harsh reminder that nature's power was vast and often unpredictable. Survival depended on vigilance, skill, and sometimes sheer luck. In the following months, Chris faced the challenge of healing both body and mind. The scars on his ribs and neck were visible reminders of the encounter, but the psychological wounds cut just as deep. Every rustle in the woods, every shadow at night stirred memories of that brutal attack. Yet he remained determined, using the experience to advocate for safety and respect in the wild. His story became a powerful cautionary tale, a testament to the thin line between hunter and hunted, and the wild's unyielding will to defend itself when cornered. Chris's survival was a miracle, and a message carved in blood and courage beneath the silent Oregon stars.